We have had, or myself and other teachers have noticed that we've had a problem when we give students a question that instead of giving us a full answer or explaining to the best of their ability, we get a lot of 1 and 2 word answers that really they're level 1 questions that do not give us a lot of input as to what they understand. We had a little powwow, thought about what we could do, and we came up with a graphic organizer that asks students in 3 different stages to apply their answer. First, what did they observe about the answer? Can they describe it, give a little bit more detail? Why might something in that observation have happened? And thirdly, to get all the points, or to get the 3rd point in this question, they would have to explain it with advanced thinking. Even if we ask students to explain their answers on a question, I find that they oftentimes either skip over it or just don't see it, whereas I'm hoping that this graphic organizer helps them to really focus in and segment their answers so that they can fully get to that higher order thinking. So the first question that we're going to look at, we did an activity here where we attached sandpaper to a block, attach some rubber bands, and as we pull on the rubber band, we discuss how the energy transfer from my hand to the rubber band to the block, get that, how the energy from my hand transfers to the rubber band, transfers to the block, and the resistance of the sandpaper might help us to understand a transform boundary during an earthquake. So the first question asks, describe the motion of the block or the plate. A lot of my students would tell me that the block moved in a staggered motion, or it jumped, or it moved in the direction that I pulled it. So in a level 1 question, which would earn them 1 out of 3 points, students would tell me the block moved in a staggering or jerking motion. And it does nothing to represent why the block moved this way or how that might represent what's going on with the energy. So the second portion of this, they need to build on this answer and tell me how. How did the block move with a jerking motion? Why was it like that? So they might tell me something to the effect that as the rubber band stretched, the block would jump forward. So they go a little bit deeper. They mention the parts. They mention that there's a stretching in the rubber band and that the block would jump forward, but they haven't really told me why this movement was occurring. And all of this is based around the fact that there's friction that is resisting the motion or the energy that I'm giving to that rubber band. So under the explain here, in order to get, and to be clear, this would get them 2 out of 3 points, but to get to that 3rd point and that higher order thinking, students would need to tell me something about the friction, something about resistance, and overcoming that friction, which is why the block would move, and then ultimately why that block would stop until more of that energy or more of that force built up in the rubber band in order to overcome the friction. So in the explain here, we're looking for something to mention all of those parts. So something to the effect of, as the rubber band stretched, the friction from the block, and right here I'm just going to put sandpaper, resisted moving until enough, and we could say energy or force here because we haven't really specifically asked for an energy answer, but we could say energy or force. I'm going to say energy in the rubber band overcame
the friction.
And this is really, it seems like a very simple question, but when you break down why this occurred, we come up with all of these points of discussion and all of these points of understanding that we can then build on in the next answer. So as we move to the next answer, I would like kids to be able to elaborate in the way that we did here. And I tell my students that if they start to understand that this is what we're looking for, they can start skipping these two boxes and move directly to the explain box. And if they can fully explain and have that understanding and show me that understanding, then I would give them all 3 points, and eventually, hopefully, we can move past using this visual diagram or this visual aid, but that students are learning how to answer in that higher order thinking.